Hello and welcome to the Fat Feminist Witch Podcast. My name is Paige. I am the Fat Feminist Witch. I also am a Fat Feminist Witch. I have been a practicing witch for about 20 years now, though there was some lazy paganism in the middle there. I am also a secular witch. I don't really ascribe to any sort of path or religion. I just kind of do what feels right within the bounds of what I find moral and ethical. I live in Canada for other Canadians out there. And I am also a fat woman and a feminist. And so I've decided to start a podcast that kind of relates to all three of those things and how they relate to each other. Now, each topic is fairly large on their own, and I could probably start a podcast about all three of those things separately, but I live in all three of those worlds simultaneously. I don't really have the option to stop being fat, or stop being a feminist, or stop being a witch, though I probably could try. I wouldn't be living my most authentic life. So sometimes people ask, oh my gosh, Paige, why would you use those three words? All three words have sort of a negative connotation almost the world over. And another thing they have in common is that they're all being reclaimed. And sometimes it's fairly recent. But in any case, all three words are being reclaimed by people who fit into that group, people who have had that word used against them as a weapon by people who don't understand, who oppose them. And I think it is important, to me anyways, to get comfortable with those words. I really want you to get excited about me using the word fat, especially. This is something that, for me, it was used in a very hurtful way. For a lot of people, especially women, it's used in a very hurtful way, not just by other people, but by society in general. And I never use it in an offensive way, ever. So why, you may ask, did I decide to start a podcast? There's a million reasons. The most recent life event that I say would contribute to this podcast coming into being was a recent stint of employment at a metaphysical store where I became reconnected with my witchy roots after being away from it for quite some time. And at first it was really amazing. I worked as a class coordinator and as a regular full-time employee there. I did the boring retail stuff like selling things and putting things into a system and ordering stuff and putting stuff away. And I taught classes, which I also planned out myself and made handouts for and all that fun stuff. And I loved the classes. And I loved the people that shopped there. And at first I really loved my job until my job became sort of threatened with an ethical personal dilemma, which of course shouldn't have affected my job at all, but it did. And in the short time that I was there, I became so much more involved in both my local pagan and metaphysical community and into that part of myself that originally reached down and found witchcraft in the first place, that it's felt impossible for me to let go. It's been a month now since I left my job, and every day I wake up and I still want to be a witch, and I want to be a witch for real all the time, professionally. So I've been thinking of other ways that I can achieve this, and a friend recommended a vlog, but I really don't wash my hair enough for that. So I decided that a podcast where I can speak my mind and make all the silly faces that I make when I'm talking and throw my arms around because I'm also Italian would be a much better fit for me. I'm a regular podcast listener. I listen to podcasts about all of the topics that I'm going to talk about, except for fat activism. If you know of a really good fat activism podcast, please let me know. I would love that. So I listen to a lot of podcasts that have to do with paganism and witchcraft in general, and I find them to be supremely interesting because every single one is totally different. Totally different. The people making the podcast, a lot of times the guests that they have on, all have very different ideas, and I love to hear these different ideas, and I especially love to hear different ideas about things like religion, morals, ethics. I like to hear those things interact. I like to see other people, or I like to hear other people's opinions on these things because they're also widely different, and I find myself agreeing with so many differing points of view because honestly, everybody's got something good to say. So I really hope you get something similar out of my podcast. I would like to have guests on in the future. So if you are a podcaster or a regular person and you would ever like to talk about fat politics, feminism, or witchcraft, and especially how those relate to each other, please let me know and I would love to have you on. So I started off by introducing myself. I talked about my witchcraft a little bit. Let's talk about those other three words. I have been fat basically my entire life. I'm sure there was a time when I was a child when no one thought I was fat, but I don't remember that. So I've been fat forever. And when I was younger, especially in high school and in my early adulthood, I thought I had really great self-confidence. I thought it was exactly where it needed to be. But I allowed people to treat me in a way that I began to recognize as not really conducive of someone who thinks that they deserve respect. And that was really upsetting. When I got into my adult years and I realized that I was allowing that to happen for so long and I had no idea. And not knowing was the part that was really upsetting. So that became kind of a journey I worked on, and it's been about 10 years now that I've accepted that I'm a fat person, fat adult. I'm gonna be a fat adult forever. I started to accept that, and I started to demand more respect. And I lost some friends. I gained some other friends. I've been single for a really long time, which I think says a lot about relations between men and women, unfortunately. And in recent years, I have been absolutely determined to be happy and comfortable in my fatness and to make sure that other people treat me like anybody else. I don't want to be treated special because I'm fat. I want to be treated exactly like other women get treated. When I look in the mirror, I don't see a different person. I see someone who's just like anybody else. But as soon as I leave my home and I have to interact with other people, that tends to change. And I don't really like that. I'd like to figure out why that happens and make sure that other people stop acting that way. Feminism is something that I didn't even realize. I didn't even realize I was a feminist for a really long time. But looking back on it, I feel like I always have been. It really started when I became a doula or a labor assistant, if that makes a little bit more sense. And I was assisting women during the process of birth, usually natural birth, but birth in general. I didn't do it for very long. I found I liked the actual, the theory and the research and feminist history a lot more than I like the actual practice of helping to deliver children. And it's not because I don't like birth. I think birth is awesome, slightly gruesome, but amazing. And I think the women, seeing the women and the families go through it was really an amazing experience. But it just wasn't for me. And so I stopped doing that, but I continued studying. I studied women's studies in college at Douglas College in Vancouver/New Westminster, for those out in British Columbia. I studied women's studies, history, and humanities, and I found that was a really great fit for me, but I was already, I wasn't fresh out of high school, so I decided to switch to a program that was a little bit less time, and I switched to tourism and travel at St. Clair College in Ontario, and I found that was a really great way for me to explore cultural history and religion and things like that I'd always been interested in. I also had a class that was very much full of women and predominantly female teachers, which I found to be really interesting. The fact that so many women are interested in learning about these other cultures and traveling the world, more so than men, statistically speaking. And that kind of brought everything full circle. At that point, people in my program were amazing. I met amazing people who didn't treat me differently because I was fat. They didn't bring up my weight. They didn't make me feel weird at all. I got invited to pool parties and they complimented my bathing suit. You know, we went out and I dressed just like anyone else, and it was just normal. I felt normal. So being a fat person was normal. Being a feminist was normal. And after I left school and I started working at the metaphysical store, all of those people who had no idea that I had been interested in witchcraft said, I think this is an amazing fit for you. I can't really imagine you doing anything else. So in the last couple of years, all three of those parts of myself have kind of formed together. And that is really the real reason that this podcast has come to be. So this is just a quick introductory post. Thank you for finding my podcast. I hope to make more episodes in the future, and I hope to keep you as a listener. And I hope to hear from some of you who've listened to this, and just let me know what kind of things you'd like me to talk about. And if you are a fat feminist witch, or a fat witch, or a fat feminist, or a feminist witch, let me know. And let me know what kind of things you go through every day. I would like to talk about them on here, and I would like to make it clear that all three of these things, they kind of bounce off of each other. They're all part of each other. Witchcraft historically is a feminist issue. Fat historically is a feminist issue. And bonus points for those who read that book that came out in the 70s, Fat is a feminist issue. And body acceptance and religious tolerance are also a feminist issue. So, again, thank you for finding my podcast, and I hope that you will hear me again soon.